In big international news, Biden officials are back in the Middle East pushing for a Gaza ceasefire and hostage release deal. And specifically, we have CIA Director Bill Burns meeting Qatari leaders in Doha to receive an update on their conversations with Hamas leaders. Because yesterday, a Qatari spokesperson said they had delivered an Israeli proposal to Hamas that reflected the position stated by U.S. President Joe Biden. And notably, they're adding that the proposal was now much closer to the positions of both sides. And so with that, this goes back to the surprisingly optimistic announcement made by Joe Biden last Friday.
Israel has offered a comprehensive new proposal. It's a roadmap to an enduring ceasefire and the release of all hostages.
And according to Biden, the first phase of this proposal would be for a full and complete ceasefire. And specifically, this would mean the withdrawal of Israeli forces from all populated areas of Gaza, the release of a number of hostages and hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, and a surge in humanitarian assistance. Right, and during this phase, Israel and Hamas would negotiate the necessary arrangements to get to phase 2.
Then phase 2 would be an exchange for the release of all remaining living hostages, including male soldiers. Israeli forces would withdraw from Gaza, and as long as Hamas lives up to its commitments, a temporary ceasefire would become, in the words of the Israeli proposal, the cessation of hostilities permanently.
And then finally, phase 3 would involve the reconstruction of Gaza, including rebuilding homes, schools, and hospitals that have been destroyed by the Israeli military. Except the problem is that the day after Biden's speech, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a statement calling a permanent ceasefire in Gaza a non-starter, with him saying, specifically, Israel's conditions for ending the war have not changed. The destruction of Hamas's military and governing capabilities, the freeing of all hostages, and ensuring that Gaza no longer poses a threat to Israel. And with that, this week, an Israeli official straight up said on Monday that Biden's description of the ceasefire proposal was not accurate. In fact, disputing that it was even an Israeli proposal at all, saying it was actually a proposal put forward by mediators to which Israel had made amendments and changes, as well as fully disputing the idea that Israel had agreed to eventually fully withdraw its troops from the Gaza Strip. But then, on the flip side, you had U.S. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby claiming afterwards the Israeli foreign minister himself acknowledged that this was the Israeli proposal. And State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said yesterday that the Israeli government had communicated to the U.S. that they were ready to implement the ceasefire deal should Hamas accept. Right, and so with all this, the U.S. and Israel just do not seem to be on the same page at all. And that could also be due to how divided Israelis are on this issue. Right, members of the country's most far-right parties are threatening to quit if a deal with Hamas is accepted, with one minister even saying that he spoke to Netanyahu and, quote, made clear to him that he will have no part in a government that agrees to the proposed outline and ends the war without destroying Hamas. But notably, Netanyahu's ultra-Orthodox coalition partners are now backing the proposal, so that could potentially offset the opposition from the far right. And with that, some opposition leaders from the other side of the aisle have explicitly endorsed Biden's speech about a deal. And leaks from within Israel's negotiating team reportedly suggest that some members would accept an end to combat in exchange for freedom of all hostages. Plus, on top of that, you have weekly demonstrations advocating for an end to this war having grown to more than 100,000. Though also, to that point, only about 40% of Israelis support the ceasefire proposal, though a large chunk are still undecided. And so with this, you had the White House National Security Advisor saying on the Today Show this morning,
Israel's a raucous democracy, so there's a lot of talk and a lot of chatter, but the Israeli government has reconfirmed repeatedly, as recently as today, that proposal is still on the table, and now it's up to Hamas to accept it. And the whole world should call on Hamas to accept it.
Which, as of recording, we're still waiting for an official response from Hamas. Though notably, just yesterday, a spokesperson for the group reiterated their concerns about Israel's unwillingness to commit to a permanent ceasefire or a complete withdrawal of forces, with them adding that Israel was interested in only a temporary ceasefire to free hostages and would then just resume the war. And to that point, on Monday, Netanyahu was quoted as saying, the war will be stopped for the purpose of returning hostages, and then we will proceed with further discussions, with him then again restating his commitment to the elimination of Hamas, right? Which is why you have people saying, these talks seem like a step forward, but also like they're in the same place. And notably, as all of this has been playing out, Israel has been stepping up its military offensive in Gaza, but specifically the latest action taking place not in the southern city of Rafah, but in central Gaza, where according to Gazan officials, at least 44 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli airstrikes in the area since yesterday. Though with that, you had the Israeli military claiming that the jets were hitting Hamas militant targets, and saying that the ground forces were operating in a, quote, focused manner with guidance from intelligence in an area that is notably one of Gaza's long-established refugee settlements. And notably, we've also seen things heating up between Israel and Lebanon, which is the country's northern neighbor. Israel's been exchanging fire with Hezbollah, an Iranian-backed militant group in Lebanon, in parallel with its assault on Gaza for the past 8 months, with this, being one of the big things raising concerns that an even wider conflict could break out in the region. And today, Netanyahu warned that Israel was prepared for, quote, very intense action in the north as he visited a border city hit by wildfires sparked by Hezbollah rockets. With this happening, as the Israeli military is now again being accused of hitting residential buildings in Lebanon with white phosphorus, which is a chemical substance that can set buildings on fire and burn human flesh down to the bone. And notably, you have these accusations coming from Human Rights Watch, with them claiming that Israel's, quote, widespread use of white phosphorus in South Lebanon is putting civilians at grave risk and contributing to civilian displacement. And to that point, they say they verified the use of white phosphorus by Israeli forces in at least 17 municipalities in South Lebanon since October of 2023, including at least 5 cases where airburst munitions were unlawfully used over populated residential areas. So in response, you had the Israeli military telling the Associated Press that it upholds international law regarding munitions, using white phosphorus only as a smokescreen, not to target civilians, but also noting that the substance is sometimes used in densely populated areas. But in any case, Human Rights Watch has said that Lebanon should take the issue to the International Criminal Court. Though notably, on that subject, the U.S. House of Representatives has now officially passed a bill to sanction the ICC over its prosecutor's decision to seek arrest warrants for Israeli officials, with even 42 Democrats joining Republicans to approve the measure in a landslide vote. Though notably here, that bill is not expected to be brought up for a vote in the Senate. And even if it did somehow pass, Biden, who has even criticized the ICC decision, has said that he strongly opposes the bill. But ultimately, that's where we are right now as we wait to see how things continue to play out.